it's an interesting proposition to invite him into your storm, really. There's a kind of a weird, unhealthy payoff to let him just be over there and be God, and I'll be in the storm over here. What if you invited him in? What if you today said, I'm in the boat and you're up front, and I don't get the storm that you do, and I will rest in you. Maybe we could do that. So let's have a little quiet time. You do that, I'll do that, and then we'll talk out loud together. Lord, I invite you into my storm. That means something. That has implications. That I would trust when I struggle to trust, that I would be at peace, which feels very out of control, that I would relinquish my agenda and be at rest, that I would open up space to worship you and be in awe. But I invite you into my storm. I pray, God, that since this is the only day there is, that you would help us to keep you in the walk that you've invited us into. Kind of an interesting thing. And that you would make yourself real in the storm, and that you would help us to be at peace with where we don't know you are in the storm, when it feels like we're alone. Thank you for this opportunity to worship together, to be together, to play together, to pray together, to listen. I pray that you, Holy Spirit, would just move through each one of our hearts and minds so that today would be an amazing start in this place. In your name, amen. Say hi to some folks, and we'll have a conversation. Well, it's good to see you guys here this morning. Welcome to Christ the King. So for those of you that are new, we're glad to be here and checking all this out. We're extremely formal and liturgical in our approach to God and worship. I think you know that. We are glad you're here. We really are. If you're new, inside your program, there are some notes you can follow along if you'd like to, and a card that will help you communicate with us, or it's an invitation to have us communicate back to you as well. So take heed, take note. There's also stuff going on. The building's half painted inside. Yeah. For those of you that are new, we're a building that we're working to get into. We're on 2121 Caldwell Boulevard. And all the HVAC is in and done, so it's it's coming together. One of the things we're doing to raise a little money and have fun is the Harvest Festival, and there's information about that inside your program. So you can read about that, participate in that. Great news for the people who have nearly lost their faith because of the no bean policy in Chile. If you've been really upset and stressed about that, please let me come and be counseled by you. I want that life. Anyway, so there are now beans in the chili cook-off. The gift that keeps on giving. I know. I just feel like we could close in prayer now. But I can't get any better than that. Anyway, I have really benefited big time from being in this story about Gideon. We've been talking about judges. And as you may know or may not know, a judge back in biblical times was a warrior, an amazing warrior, and there were 12 of them. The story of those 12 judges is in the book of Judges. We've been talking about several of them, and one of the things that every one of their stories has in common is that they were necessary because Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. And the evil that they did in the sight of the Lord was to neglect God. And part of me wants to say they simply neglected God, but it's not a simple thing. To neglect God is a huge, big mistake. And so in their place, they would build the Baals and the Asheroths and these different Canaanite gods, which is so weird. And they would just find themselves in horrible situations. And then finally, they would cry out to God. In Hebrew, it's the cry of a lesser to a greater. They would be crying out to God because they were in big trouble. And in their crying out to God, God would finally answer by giving them a judge. We started 2 Sundays ago talking about Gideon. And all of the Israelites were living in caves and crags and rocks. And 120,000 Midianites plus other eastern peoples were all camped in the huge big valley in the kind of the center of what we see as Israel right now, the east and western Manasseh area back in that day. And there were 120,000 just soldiers, and then there were Amalekites and there were other eastern people, and what they would do, they would just take turns ravaging the poor Hebrews, the Israelites, and they'd take their cattle, they'd take their crops, and it was just a bad, bad scene. And so here's this one guy, he's a farmer, his name's Gideon, he's threshing wheat. And he's not in a threshing floor on the side of a hill where the breeze would come and blow the chaff away. He's actually hiding in a big wine barrel, a wine press. And he would have, a full regalia. If he didn't, he'd be hot and there'd be chaff just sticking all over him. And it was just, And God shows up in the form of an angel and says, Gideon, mighty warrior. And Gideon literally says, excuse me? Pardon me? And so God lays out a plan. Gideon's scared to death. You remember the story. And so finally he goes, look, if you're going to do this, show me that this is actually what you want me to do. Tomorrow morning when I wake up, make this lambskin soaking wet and everything else dry. It happened. He reversed the order the next day. And so it was time. It was game on. Gideon and one of the servants went down, and because he was scared to death. He was really afraid. And he went down and he heard these guys talking about a dream that revealed to all of Israel that this thing was going to happen. Gideon was going to roll in here like a big barley loaf of bread and just kill us, right? So Gideon's feeling really good now. He takes thousands of men, and God goes, you know what? No, too many. Let me thin those out. I'm going to call out the herd. And so they go through a process, and it gets down to 10,000. And then God says, here's the deal. In the event that you think that you're running the parade, let's cull it down a little bit more. Because you might take responsibility for everything that's going on, and that's not how this is supposed to work. And so he does this kind of funny lapping water experiment kind of a deal, and God calls out 9,700. There are 300 guys left, and they're invited to take a jar, a torch in the jar, and a trumpet, and just trust that somehow 300 guys with a jar and a little band of trumpets, somehow they were going to win. And they believed Gideon. And Gideon said what all of us need to be willing to say to people that are trying to figure out who God is and how this thing works. Just do what I do. What do we do? Just do what I do. Well, I'm not going to do this just right. I don't either. But just do what I do. I'm doing the walk the best that I can. Maybe you can too. So Gideon gets everybody positioned all around this thing. And when a trumpet blows in war, how many people does it represent? 1,000. That's right. Good job. Nice. It represents 1,000. And so these guys are all around the valley. And it's midnight. And nobody ever fights at midnight. The only thing that happens at midnight is you have an exchanging of the guards. The guard is exchanging. So people in the dark with little torches are walking through the dark as they're exchanging. There are lots of different languages, dialects, different looks of the people, because there are a lot of different tribes in this enemy camp. And at midnight, where you never fight, Gideon pulls
the torch that has a little bit of ember on it out of the jar. The wind hits it, it lights up. Everybody else does it too. He blows the horn, everybody blows their trumpet, and they yell, "For the Lord and for Gideon." And all of the people in the dark are so freaked out, they start whacking each other until all but 15,000 are dead. And so these guys are standing there going, "This is amazing. This is the best war ever." Ever, you know? So that's a recap that gets us to the story and where we are today. What is really interesting is that it's just human nature for us to go, you know, the way this used to be, plus the way I am right now, equals this right here, and then I will move forward in my own strength and with my own wisdom. It's just human nature, you know. So if you read the first 22 verses of Judges chapter 8, which starts into the third act, if it was broken up into a 3-act play, then you see that, you know, that's the war, that's the battle. And then he begins, as we talked about last week, inviting some of the other guys in, and then they start taking off, and these 300 guys rout 15,000. They punish some guys because they didn't give them something to eat along the way. And if you just stop for a second and set your love and admiration for Gideon aside, you might just say, in the last part of chapter 7, the first 22 verses of Judges 8, you might just say, is this still what God had in mind? You know, I'm not seeing anything bad going on. You know how you just kind of get that unsettled sense? Is this how this is supposed to work? Huh. Interesting, because God didn't tell them to do any of those things. When you have a military commander, and the commander in chief is God, and that's where the military commander gets all of his information, and then the military commander launches out and you do a whole bunch of stuff without checking in with the commander-in-chief, that could go bad. Even when everything seems to be working out well, even when it all looks really good to everybody. If you're taking notes this morning, I have found personally that when I keep fighting life's battles on my own terms, my message to God is, I'll take it from here. Especially when things are starting to go pretty good. I'll take it from here. I'll just, you know what, I got this. Which is a very interesting place to be. I don't know if you've ever been in that place. You don't actually say it, but you know, there are a lot of nonverbals in this world. There's only a few percentage points of what we do that are actually attributed to words when we start communicating. Voice inflection, body language. When we move out on our own, you know, trust the Lord. See, what is my favorite verse? Somebody help me.
All your heart.
Trust the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. Da-da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. Remember that? You know that's my favorite verse. You know that. Listen, when you were raised in the 60s, you have little air pockets every once in a while. Yeah. I'll take it from here. I'll take it from here. And then I find, number 2 in your notes, when I don't feel helpless, it's because I forget I still need help. You know? Let me just tell you a great way to live large. If you want to live large, and I don't mean lots of pizza and chicken wings. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about abundant life. Learn to lean into Him more in the good times. That is a huge step. If you want a leading maturity indicator in your life, that would be one. You know, I'm in between the storms. You know, I can see God's hand, how that all worked out, and it looks good in front of me. I'm going to lean into Him. You know, at times, I personally have to ask myself what I really mean when I say I'm a Christian. You ever wonder that? You know, what do I really mean? And what do I really want? Do I want somebody to come in and bail me out from time to time? And to save me from the hell and not, you know, mess with my head and heart and soul? Is that what I'm looking for? what do I really want? You know, if I don't have someone relationally to lean into when times are good, what do I want? Israel obviously didn't want God. They wanted a solution. And we see that at every point. As soon as a judge dies, Israel then forgets what God said, forgets what God did, how he rescued them, and Israel does evil in the sight of the Lord. Bam! Just like that. But we got the chicken farmer. He's a farmer and he's a chicken. Gideon, oh man, he wouldn't blow it. No, no, no. Not when you experience all that, you know. Not when you experience all that. Not after all that he and God have gone through. There's got to be some kind of like special dispensation, or there's something moving forward that puts him in a whole different place. He's special. Well, let's just take a look, okay? Verse 22 in the story of Judges chapter 8. The Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us. You and your sons and your grandsons, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Did you hear it? An invitation to jump into the very front of the parade and lead us. One of the dangers of true humility, because you know, he has been really humble through the story. You might question it if you get all the way through the story, through Judges chapter 8, and then look back and go, where'd this thing break down? You might question it, you know, at the end of chapter 7, the first 22 verses of chapter 8. But without all of that, if you just stop at this point, you would probably say, this is a humble man who knows where his story is anchored, who trusts in the Lord with all his heart. But I think that there is kind of a weird danger lurking around true humility. And that is when I feel like I am humble. I'm a humble guy. You know? I personally have felt in the last, few, maybe years, that I think I've been doing okay with the humility thing, pretty well in the humility area. And then I started wondering the other day, who's going to get credit for getting this building done inside? I'm just wondering. Just wondering. Will it be Brett, who on his many, many days off saved us because we were stuck at the electrical piece? And then it was there. It's like this great miracle. Would it be Doug Amick, who shows up and puts in hours every single week and becomes the fulcrum around all this thing? Will it be me? Because I ultimately have to end up making all of the decisions about where we're going, and how this thing ends up and who gets to pull the triggers. I'm just wondering, And then some of those options started to bother me. But it's okay, because I'm just wondering. I do best when I take my wanderings to the altar and offer them as a sacrifice to the Lord. And if you feel like you should have been in that list, you might just be wondering why you weren't. You might be in it with me, Number 3 in your notes, when I listen to my own press release, I just might hear it. Not just listen to it. Hear it. There's a difference, You can listen to it. But did you hear it? Judges chapter 7, verse 2. Lord said to Gideon, you have too many guys. I can't deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel's going to boast and say, my own strength has saved me. So the question, will Gideon be the man of God that we have come to love? Verse 23, but Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor will my sons rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And you go, yes! He's that guy, man. He is that guy. Verse 24, and he said, I do have one request, though. Just wondering. Maybe each of you could just give me an earring from your share of the plunder. You know. So, it was a custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. You know, you could, if you want to, you can do that, but hey, it's okay, don't elevate me as something special, In your notes, what happens when I'm not willing to be king, but I act like one? It's not good. It's kind of the same as when I say that I'm a Christian and I start to act like someone who's really not. Or I say that I'm humble, which I noticed as soon as I said that humble, you started laughing, which really helped me to stay more humble. And I don't know, not everybody has that issue. Not, Misty, I don't know that you will ever have a problem, being humble. I don't. We were all done, ready, had the plans done, and Misty said, in fact, Chip said, have you talked to Misty? No, we don't need to talk to Misty. I was in a building once, we can do this. And Misty takes a look, I think here's how I would do it. So, we redraw everything. Every single thing, because of Misty, who's trying to be the pastor. You can see her high and lifted up, sitting in the front row by she's not even related to the band guy, she just wants to look good. That's what's going on right now. Some of you won't have trouble with being humble, I do sometimes. I do. Transaction is simple. I craft a very, very small lie. It's so small, it's not a lie. When I say I am a Christ follower and I make an ever so slight non-follower decision. Just slight. And I find myself on the road to be King Richard. But I'm not the king. I'm not the king with my mouth. It's Christ the King, not Rick the King. With my mouth, I'm going to tell you, I am not a mouth king, okay? I might be a heart king. But I'm not a mouth king. So just listen. I will give you the right words, okay? I know the answers. So they said, yeah, we'll give you our earrings. Heck yeah, you bet. We'll be glad to give them. So they spread out a garment and they threw down 43 pounds of gold. And if you're giving a guy your earring, which is a big symbolic move, and there's something about him that makes you feel like, out of political correctness, I'd have given him some of the purple that I got out of one of those towns and maybe the camel chain. And he's just like, oh, don't throw in the camel chain. No. If you are, it goes over here. I'm just saying, I am not deserving. So, the weight of the gold, verse 26, of the rings, he asked him 1,700 shekels, that's a little over 43 pounds, not counting the ornaments. Oh, now there's ornaments. The pendants and pendants. And there's purple, the royal color worn by the kings of Midian, or the big chains that hung around the camels' necks. Just do your tithe. You don't have to do an offering, okay? But if you do, it goes in that box. Number 5, in your notes. It is hard to give God the glory when I think I deserve. Fill in the blank. And how would you finish the thought? What would you say? See, I have to be very careful because deep in my heart, I can tap into a little deception well. And it's deep. It is so deep that only because I'm old and remember a few things, I know that it's there. But I also forget it's there because I'm old. I forget a few things. So I have to be very, very careful because that is deep. And when I don't attend to me in my walk with him, I can be at risk. I can say, Rick, you deserve this. You deserve it. You know what? I don't deserve that. And then, fortunately, my head takes over, and I tell myself what I know. I don't deserve anything. Every perfect gift, every good and perfect gift comes from heaven. Everything I have that God has given me to do whatever I have done, that gives me what I have, that is all from God. I don't deserve anything. Then when I get to that place, finally, when my head convinces my heart in that deep place, this is in a good alignment, then I can do God large and just make it easy for everybody. I can do everybody a huge, big favor when it comes to worship because it's quite inconvenient and there is some expense if you have to go 2.5 hours to the high priest, which is the situation that we're in right here. And so Israel will be happy. God will be happy. I'll just take what is mine, at least, the earrings, the rest is the love offering, doesn't count. I'll just take what's mine, and I'll give it to God as a holy vest, an ephod. And if you remember, that ephod is for the high priest and the high priest only. You look in Exodus. And it's like an apron with straps, okay? And here's what's interesting. You have 43 pounds of gold, and it's almost all cloth. There are a couple of onyx stones up here with some gold around it, and then there's this gold that has 6 of the names of the Israel tribes on this side, 6 on this tribe, and then there's this belt that has a little bit of gold that is spun into the rope that holds it together. There ain't no 43 pounds of gold in an ephod. And there is no reason whatsoever you ought to be thinking that you should make one and wear one, because God made it very, very clear how it's supposed to be made and who's supposed to wear it. It's the high priest. Gideon made the gold into an ephod. Wow. Which he placed in Ophrah, his town. It didn't say he wore it. It said he placed it. Remember, he grew up where his dad had the Baal and the Asherah pole in his backyard. It's a kind of a community thing. Well, he took this great gold ephod, this holy vest. Ephod literally means holy vest. And high and lifted up. Wow, God, you must think I'm amazing. Amazing. And all of Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it. Not God, it. And it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Number 6. I get stuck when I act on the feeling that says, I need to be needed here. I need to do this. I need to be needed. When these people see what I've done, they'll realize that at great sacrifice to me, which was nothing, by the way, at great sacrifice to me, I have made this for them. And the truth is, they didn't make it for them. They made it for themselves. Remember one time, after a bunch of counseling and a bunch of work that Patty and I had done, getting our marriage healed up and righted, I remember right where it was. It was in the family room in Mount Vernon, and Patty said, I had an epiphany, a great thing. I realized I don't need you. And I said, that's great, with my mouth. Because I know how to be a mouth king. But my heart did not feel so good about that. And what she was saying, and how I've counseled people, and what I know is to be right, is she's saying that she's discovered the gift of her. And it's okay to be who God made her to be, and that she can unwrap that package. And it's great. It was great. And I sat down. Because it didn't feel very good, you know. I had developed my sick version of how great it'd be to be needed while I'm telling her, I don't want you to need me. In the mouth king. I get stuck when I act on the feeling that says I need to be needed. And it can be there. When I'm not even aware, deep down in that deep down place. Verse 28. Thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites. So, all of the enemies are all at bay, and they didn't raise a head. They did not raise its head again during Gideon's lifetime. The land was at peace for 40 years. You know why? Not because of Gideon, because of grace. Grace that doesn't allow that to make sense. This doesn't. So in verse 29, Haru-Baal, which means the idol smasher, which was the nickname that Gideon got because he did what God told him to do and smashed the idol in his dad's yard. The son of Joash went back home to live, so he had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. Let me just ask you, if you can take yourself back into any historical reading that you've done, or a Ten Commandment movie, or someplace where you just look back in antiquity at this time, who is it that has that many wives and sons? Who is it? Kings. Absolutely, kings. Verse 31, his concubine, but he's not a king. I mean, let's make that perfectly clear. His concubine, which is like a lesser wife, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, who he named Abimelech. Abimelech means, ready? My father's a king. That's exactly what it means. He would never say that. But you know what? Always love the name Abimelech. Always love that. Great name. Wow. So Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father, Joash, in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. How did Gideon get to a place where God no longer mattered? He learned how to live behind a veil of righteousness. Self-righteousness. Not God-righteousness, self-righteousness. So you remember when Moses went up and he spent time with God, and there was this Shekinah glory, and it was a present, just light shining, just this amazing, glorious moment, and it got on him. God's glory got on him. And so to not freak out his people when he went back down, he put a veil over his face. Remember that? If you don't remember the story, read the story. It's a great story. Because here's the deal. The glory wore off, but the veil didn't come off. Yeah. See, the problem with the veil is no one gets to pull the veil of self-righteousness off, because it would be a spiritual travesty. There's no humility attached to the veil. And the sad problem is the world can see through the veil. Which is why so many of our churches don't have many people in them today. It's a simple reality, really, and it's your next fill-in. No matter what I say, I do what I value. I do. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal Berith as their god and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Harub Baal, that's Gideon, in spite of all of the good things that he had done for them. Message to me. Number 8. If I don't think my life can unravel spiritually, then it already has. Even if I don't know it, which is how it always starts. How do I keep from a sad ending? I don't want to end like that. I don't. I want to end well. So how do I do that? 4 things quickly. Number 1, confront the compromise. There's a word that we learned in college called syncretism, which is basically where you combine a whole bunch of beliefs into your own. You make your own little belief bag. You are a syncretic spiritualist. You have all of these God things, but inside of all of these God things that you've made, there's a little bit of this and a little of that, a little culture, a little, abstract truth, a little relevant truth, maybe some immutable truth, which means unchanging truth, and then a couple things that the culture really has gotten right. That why would you fight that? Which then makes you God of your own life. There are these little compromises, and they start before you know they've started. Does that make us bad? No, of course not. It makes us human. But knowing that gives us an opportunity to decide to build the practices into our life that keep us aware. Confront the compromise. I do this, and I know it's wrong. Or, so that's the disrepair that comes from when, we do things wrong. Or there's the sin of omission. I know I'm supposed to do this, but I've been unwilling because of my own compromise. So to get unstuck, part of getting unstuck is confronting the compromise. And a part of ending well is continuing to confront the compromise. And do not beat yourself up because you find ways to compromise. You're just normal. Just normal. Okay? Number 2, find someone who will tell me my soul is in a snare. It's in a little trap. I've got a couple people. I spent some time with one yesterday. In fact, I talked about some of this as a confession to my friend David Underwood earlier this week as I was studying. He said, wow, man. Wow. You got to have somebody. God was serious when in Genesis he said, it is not good for man to be what? Alone. It is not. And it has never been easier than right now. And to the degree that you may be broken and struggling with your own self-esteem issues, then you will, as I have done so many times, measure everybody out. I don't want to tell them, and they're a new Christian, or they may think this of me, or I'm doing business with them. That guy knows my wife's best friend. Blah, 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 blah. On my own, how sad, how lonely it is when I'm the one that measured everybody out. You've got to have those people in your life. Absolutely have to have them in your life. Number 3, make sure that my deserving heart is checked at the altar. What is it that I'm saying I deserve? Or that I don't deserve that to happen to me? Check it at the altar. And number 4, finally, make sure that my wheel has spokes that are connected. You see, if you think about your core values, if you're in an organization, for example, and you have core values, and core values are always to be statements. Here's who we will be in order to influence the rest of the strategic intent, which is mission, vision, okay, and purpose. So in order to accomplish mission, vision, and purpose, here are the 4 to 10 things we will be. When an organization says that, our purpose is this, our vision is this, and our mission then to accomplish that vision so we do business on purpose is this, and then our core values are completely disconnected from the core, now we have a problem. We have a huge problem. It's like trying to ride a bike and everything's there but the spokes. There's nothing that connects the core to the place where the rubber meets the road. So, what I say I believe needs to line up with how I do my life. And if there are multiple sets of rules, I do my life this way at work, and I do my life this way over here at home, and this way with my kids, and, you have multiple concepts, you have multiple ways that you do your life, then you don't know what direction you're going or what speed you're going in. You just know you're on a ride and making good time. But the arrival place is amorphous. You don't know where it is. Who we are and who we say we are and what we do has to align for the wheel to go around and for us to get forward movement. It just has to. Now, we have some small group questions there. I don't know if you ever looked at those questions. Maybe it's the reason why you don't go to a small group if you're not in one, because they're rough. They just invite us to peel back all of the stuff and talk about what's going on in a deep way, only to find out we all have our own version of that. It's really a wonderful thing. So I want to invite you to think about, should I be in a small group? I need to be in a small group. Should I host a small group? Host a small group is an hour and a half. Start it at your house. And you say, hey, everybody, let's get to know each other's names and what we might want to know about each other, tell each other stories, and then see if you can get through a question or two. Ask, is there some things we can pray about, and go home at an hour and a half. You do not have to be a rocket scientist or a biblical scholar to facilitate a small group. What you need is you need to have an interest in staying in this Christ walk, and a pulse, that's always good, and a willingness to go where you've not gone before. Take the walls down. You want to be in a small group or host a small group? Either one. Write that on the back of your white card and put it in the box, and here's what will happen. You'll get a phone call. You won't answer it or return it. Let's try doing that one a little bit, okay? So how about you write it on the back? It goes to voicemail, and when you hear it, you go, I was so into that when I wrote it Sunday. I am so not right now, but I need to be. I'm going to do the hard thing of connecting that spoke to the hub, to the core of who I say I am and what I say I believe. Would you stand with me? And now may we be the people who continue to give ourselves permission to be human and honest and real, but staying with the walk, being in relationship, so that we don't have to end like Gideon. So many of us here have had great starts and we're in great places. God, we want to end well not to be great, not to be a mouth king, but to be in love with an amazing God who's gone to prepare a place for us. God, help us to walk out today in the confidence of who we are in the journey with you, and to live honestly today as your people. And all God's people said.
Amen.
Okay, now, you have a box down here and a couple in the back the ushers will have for your tithes and offerings and cards. God bless you. Have a great week.